3 players left. 1 arrived. That alone would have been a story. In a league where trades happen quietly, where names move between cities like pieces on a board that most fans never fully see, a 3-for-1 deal carries weight. It announces itself. It says something about what a team believes it is missing and what it is willing to give to fill that space. But this was not just any 3-for-1. Ward. Kim Hyeseong. Rushing. All at once. Gone. And who walked through the door in return was not a utility piece. Not a depth arm. Not a reclamation project wrapped in potential. He was a starting pitcher. On a 4-year contract. A man who had stood beside Shohei Ohtani in a previous uniform, in a previous chapter, when both of them were somewhere else entirely. And when Ohtani was asked about it, in that brief, careful way reporters approach him, knowing his answers tend to be shorter than the questions deserve, he didn't deflect. He didn't give the standard line about being excited for the organization or trusting the front office's vision. He said, "It's very nice to have him on the team." That was it. 6 words. But inside those 6 words was a warmth that Ohtani rarely lets reach the surface in a press room. And anyone paying attention understood immediately that this trade was not simply a transaction. It was a reunion. The Dodgers do not make moves by accident. That is the first thing any observer of this franchise has to hold in mind when trying to understand what happened. Los Angeles does not wake up one morning and decide to move 3 players simultaneously on impulse. Every piece of a Dodgers trade, every name attached to every offer, has been studied, stress-tested, and argued over inside a front office that operates with the kind of patience most organizations cannot afford. So when Ward, Kim Hyeseong, and Rushing all appeared in the same transaction, the immediate question wasn't what the Dodgers were giving up. It was what they had decided they needed badly enough to give all 3 at once. The answer, arriving on a 4-year contract, was a starting pitcher. And not just any starting pitcher. A man Ohtani already knew. A man whose mechanics Ohtani had studied from the other side of a clubhouse. A man whose competitive presence, the way he carries himself between starts, the way he prepares, the way he handles the weight of being counted on, Ohtani had experienced firsthand in a way no scouting report can fully capture. When Ohtani says it's very nice to have him on the team, he is not performing enthusiasm for the cameras. He is telling you something he knows from memory. Ward was not an easy name to move. Inside the Dodgers system, he represented something real. Not a ceiling player. Not someone whose ceiling was already written in stone. But a productive piece. A name that appeared in lineup cards with consistency. The kind of player a team leans on without always acknowledging how much leaning is happening until he's no longer there. Kim Hyeseong was different in texture but similar in value. He brought a quality of contact, a defensive reliability, a presence in the middle of a roster that does not announce itself loudly but is felt every single day. Organizations that have lost players like Kim Hyeseong know what the absence feels like before they know what to call it. Rushing was the youngest of the 3. The one with the most runway. The one where the cost felt most like a bet, not on who he was, but on who he had not yet become. Moving a player with that kind of remaining projection is the part of a trade that front offices sit with longest. And Los Angeles moved all 3 of them at once. That is not a minor concession. That is a declaration. It says, "We have identified something on the other side of this deal that we believe is worth more to what we are building right now than everything we are sending out combined." A 4-year starting pitcher commitment is exactly that kind of declaration. 4 years. In baseball, 4 years is a long sentence. It is long enough for a pitcher's fastball to age. Long enough for an injury to change the entire shape of a contract. Long enough for the team that signs it to look brilliant or reckless depending entirely on what happens between starts. The Dodgers signed it anyway. Which means their medical staff cleared him. Their analytics team modeled his trajectory. Their coaches watched enough footage to believe that what they were looking at was not a peak already cresting but something still building, still reliable, still capable of doing exactly what a rotation needs from a committed starter. They believed in the next 4 years. And Ohtani, standing in the same clubhouse, already knows who this man is when things get difficult. He has seen it. Not from the stands. Not from the broadcast feed. From inside. There is a particular kind of knowledge that only comes from being teammates. It is not statistical. It cannot be found in a spin rate chart or an exit velocity model. It is the knowledge of how a man handles a bad start. How he carries himself in the dugout when things aren't going his way. Whether he is the same person in April that he is in September. Whether the competitive fire that looks so clean in highlight packages is actually consistent across a full season, across rain delays and losing streaks and nights when nothing is working. Ohtani has that knowledge about this pitcher. That is the context behind it's very nice to have him on the team. Not, I've admired him from afar. Not, I've seen his numbers and I'm impressed by what the front office put together. But, I already know who this person is. I've already seen him in the moments that matter. And I want him here. When one of the most private competitors in professional baseball tells a press room that something is very nice, in that measured, deliberate way of his, it registers differently than when anyone else says it. Ohtani does not spend warmth casually. Inside the receiving side of this trade, the reaction was its own story. 3 players arriving is not a simple intake. It is a disruption to a roster's chemistry, a reshuffling of roles, a recalibration of how a clubhouse understands itself. Ward, Kim, Hyeseong, and Rushing will walk into a new environment, where new numbers, sit in new chairs in a new weight room, and begin the process of becoming someone else's teammate. That process is never nothing. It is almost never as clean as a trade announcement makes it sound. But for Los Angeles, the math was done. The outcome of keeping those 3 players was weighed against the outcome of securing a 4-year starting arm with this particular history, this particular profile, this particular relationship to the man at the center of everything the Dodgers are trying to build. The math came out on one side. It almost always does, with this front office. Dave Roberts, when asked about the trade in the hours after it was confirmed, had the look of a manager who had been part of the conversation long enough that the surprise had already passed. His answers came with the steadiness of someone who has had time to settle into a decision before the world finds out about it. He was asked what specifically convinced the organization to move 3 players simultaneously. He took a moment. Placed his hands flat on the table. He said, "There's a version of this roster that's very good. And then there's a version of this roster that's built for October in a specific way. We wanted the second version. This was how we got there." He didn't elaborate on the 3 players who left. He mentioned them respectfully, their contributions, their character, the difficulty of these decisions. But he didn't linger. The present was what mattered now. And the present had a new starting pitcher. A reporter asked whether the Ohtani connection had any influence on the decision. Roberts smiled slightly. Not a deflection. More like someone acknowledging that the question had already answered itself. He said, "When you have someone who can tell you from personal experience what a player is like inside a clubhouse, you listen. That's always going to be information that matters to us." He left it at that. The new pitcher hadn't yet held his first press conference in Dodger blue when the statement made its way through the league's information channels. Reporters were already constructing the narrative around the trade, the cost, the commitment, the upheaval, when Ohtani's words arrived and reframed the entire conversation. "It's very nice to have him on the team." 6 words. But what those words did, in the context of everything else swirling around this trade, was anchor it. They removed a layer of abstraction from the transaction. Trades are usually about numbers and projections and organizational philosophy. This one, through Ohtani's statement, became suddenly personal. Suddenly human. This is a reunion. This is one competitor telling the world that he fought alongside this man before, that he knows what this man is made of, and that he is glad, genuinely glad, not professionally glad, that they are going to be on the same side again. In a sport that can sometimes feel like a spreadsheet comes to life, that kind of statement lands differently. What the Dodgers have assembled now, with this rotation addition slotted behind their existing structure, is something that will take the full shape of the season to fully understand. A 4-year contract is a long promise. Starting pitching is the most fragile investment in baseball. Nothing is guaranteed. But the Dodgers have Ohtani at the center of everything they do. And Ohtani now has a former teammate beside him, someone who knows how he works, who respects what he brings, who has already shared the particular pressure of competing at the level both of them compete at. That is not a small thing. Competitive chemistry between the people who occupy the same 40-man roster, who sit in the same dugout, who understand each other's rhythms, is one of the most undervalued currencies in October baseball. The teams that go deep in the postseason are rarely the teams with the best individual pieces. They are usually the teams where something less visible is working. Something that shows up in the moments between pitches. In the conversations in the tunnel before a deciding game. In the trust that comes from already having been through something hard together. Ward, Kim Hyeseong, and Rushing are gone. What the Dodgers received in return is a starting pitcher, a 4-year commitment, and something that no press release fully captures. Ohtani already knows this man. He already trusts him. In a city that expects championships and a franchise built specifically to deliver them, that trust might prove to be the most important thing that changed hands in this entire deal. It's very nice to have him on the team. He meant it. And in October, when the lights are brightest and the margins are thinnest and the game reduces itself to the smallest possible moments, that kind of meaning tends to matter more than anyone in a front office conference room can ever fully plan for. 3 players left. 1 walked in. And the man who mattered most in that moment had 6 words ready. That was enough.